The day of her wedding was supposed to be perfect, but for Amara, it turned into a nightmare. The garden ceremony was beautiful. White flowers lined the aisle, soft music drifted in the breeze, and every seat was filled. Amara stood beside her fiancé, Daniel, holding his hands and looking into his eyes with cautious hope. She was 33 and had waited a long time for this moment. Daniel was 35, calm and kind, everything she had prayed for. They dated for 2 years and lived together for 1, sharing joys, fights, even couples therapy. It wasn't a whirlwind, it was deliberate. But Daniel's family never liked her. His mother, Margaret, never smiled sincerely. His sister, Cynthia, was worse. Blunt, bitter, always interrogating Amara like she was applying for a job. "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Margaret had once asked during dinner, ignoring Daniel completely. Cynthia had rolled her eyes and muttered, "She never talks about her past." Suspicious. Amara had tried to brush it off. She was a marketing strategist, private by nature, exhausted by social games. She wasn't hiding anything. But they weren't interested in understanding her. They had already decided. She was not to be trusted. Daniel tried to reassure her. "They're just paranoid," he'd said. "They did the same thing to my ex." But Amara sensed something darker. When Daniel confessed, "They're having someone look into you," she started to worry. She ran a background check on herself just to be sure. Clean. Still, she felt a storm brewing. The ceremony began. The officiant raised his voice to say, "If anyone objects, speak now or forever hold your peace." And that's when it happened. A man stood up at the back, wearing a wrinkled suit and looking wildly out of place. His shirt was half untucked, hair disheveled. He shouted, "She's already married to me." The entire garden froze. Amara's heart pounded. She turned to Daniel, her eyes wide. "I don't know this man," she whispered. But his face had already drained of color. Margaret stood slowly, lips curled in triumph. Cynthia leaned in to whisper, then smirked. Amara blinked in disbelief. The man, let's call him Marcus, marched forward, holding papers in his hand. "I married her in Florida in 2016, Marcus shouted. "She disappeared. Never divorced me. Now she's committing bigamy." He waved a piece of paper in the air, what looked like a marriage certificate. Amara's hands trembled. "I swear, I've never seen him before in my life." But Margaret's voice cut through the silence. "We told you. She's hiding something." Cynthia added, "This whole relationship is a lie." Daniel didn't move. He didn't ask Amara anything. He just stared at Marcus, then at her, then at the document. His silence was worse than yelling. Amara's voice shook. "This is fake," she said. Nobody moved. The officiant looked like he wanted to disappear. Margaret looked like she was savoring every second. But Amara hadn't come unprepared. She had felt the tension, the suspicious questions, the calculated smiles. She knew they would try something. So she had done her own digging. Weeks earlier, she'd contacted the court in Florida where Marcus claimed they had been married. Their reply was clear. Someone had attempted to register a marriage using her name, but it was rejected because the documents didn't match. The ID was fake. It had never been legally filed. She printed the entire paper trail, tucked it into her purse, and waited. When Marcus began shouting, she didn't crumble. She pulled out the folder. "Everything he's saying is a lie," she said firmly. "And I can prove it." Amara's voice rang clear through the stunned silence. She stepped forward and handed the folder to Daniel. "It's all in there. Court documents, emails, everything." He opened it with trembling fingers. The first page was from the Florida County Clerk, stating the marriage application had been rejected due to ID mismatches. The next page was a statement from a friend in Florida who confirmed seeing Marcus near Margaret's house months before the wedding. Then came the screenshots. Emails between Cynthia and someone named Marcus James. One subject line read, "Script for the wedding scene." Cynthia had planned this. Margaret had paid him. Daniel's face twitched as he turned the pages. his hands beginning to shake. "Did you do this?" Daniel finally asked, looking up at his mother. Margaret didn't answer right away. She looked at the crowd instead and said, "I don't care what anyone thinks. I was protecting my son." Cynthia crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. "She's just acting now." But no one laughed. No one clapped. No one looked amused. Amara raised her voice again. "There's also a restraining order against Marcus. He trespassed, impersonated a spouse, and now he's trying to ruin my name in public." As soon as she said restraining order, Marcus turned pale. He took one look around, then started walking backward. Then he ran out of the tent. Just like that, gone. But the damage was already done. Daniel didn't speak another word to Amara that day. He just stood frozen, folder still in hand, while his guests whispered and stared. Margaret and Cynthia disappeared before the reception even began. Amara didn't chase anyone. She sat at a corner table and ate a slice of cake she paid for herself. No tears, just silence. Her wedding dress felt heavier than ever. She wasn't sure if Daniel would ever forgive his family. She wasn't sure she wanted him to. Something inside her had cracked, not just from what they did, but how easily he let it happen. When the last guest left, she stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked out alone. Back at her apartment, Amara collapsed onto the bed, her dress still half-zipped, makeup smeared. Her mind raced, but her body couldn't cry. At 6 a.m. she checked her phone. No messages from Daniel. Not even a missed call. But she got a notification instead. Cynthia had posted on Instagram. A black background with white text. "Sometimes the truth hurts, but lies hurt more. Hashtag family first, hashtag truth wins." The comments made her stomach turn. "What happened? Proud of you for speaking up. So brave." They were spinning the story already. Changing the narrative before Amara even had a chance to breathe. The war wasn't over, it had just changed shape. Later that morning, someone knocked at her door. She looked through the peephole, it was Daniel. His eyes were red, the same crumpled suit from the day before clinging to his body like shame. She opened the door but didn't say a word. He stepped in and sat on the couch. The silence stretched painfully. Finally he whispered, "I didn't know they would go that far." She nodded slowly, arms folded. "You believed him," she said. He didn't deny it. "I panicked," he mumbled. "I didn't know what to believe." She walked to a drawer, pulled out an envelope of screenshots, and dropped them on the table. "Then you should have asked," she said quietly. "Not stood there letting me drown." Daniel rubbed his face with both hands, as if trying to wake himself up from a bad dream. "I want to fix this," he said. "I've already blocked Cynthia. I haven't spoken to my mom since yesterday." Amara sat across from him, arms still folded. Her voice was calm but cold. "Have you told them what they did was wrong?" He looked down. That was enough answer for her. "Did you yell at them the way you stared me down yesterday? Did you defend me the way I had to defend myself?" He didn't reply. The silence between them felt like a wall that had finally revealed just how thick it truly was. That week, whispers started to surface. Amara began getting messages from distant guests and mutual friends. One of Daniel's cousins reached out privately on Facebook. "I'm really sorry for what happened," the message read. "But you should know, Margaret is telling people you faked the file. That you're framing them." Amara's stomach twisted. The lies were multiplying. Then she got a call from her boss. Someone had anonymously sent a file to Human Resources accusing Amara of having a criminal record, a fake identity, and false job references. Thankfully, her boss trusted her and called directly. "We know who you are, Amara," she said. "But let me know if you want us to pursue legal action." Now, Amara wasn't just shocked. She was furious. 3 days later, a message lit up her phone. It was from Cynthia. "You should really stop pretending. You've already done enough damage. If you want this to end, meet me. Just us. No drama." She showed the text to Daniel, who immediately said, "Don't go." But she needed to. She needed to hear it for herself. They met at a diner on Route 59. Public and safe. Amara wore a small lapel mic and recorded the whole thing on her phone. Cynthia walked in like a celebrity, oversized sunglasses and an expensive coat, sipping a smoothie like it was a cocktail. She sat across from Amara, calm and confident. "You're not going to win," Cynthia said, her voice low but laced with venom. "We protected Daniel. You embarrassed him. You embarrassed our family. And now you want to act like the victim." Amara didn't flinch. She stared back calmly. Cynthia leaned in closer. "You think a folder full of screenshots makes you smart. It makes you look desperate." Then she said it. "Mark was a friend of a friend. We paid him. We never thought he'd actually show up. He was just supposed to cause some doubt. He went rogue." Amara blinked once. "You emailed him a script." Cynthia smirked. "So prove it." But Amara didn't have to say anything. She already had. That very night Amara received a call. It was from Mark, the man who crashed her wedding. His voice was low and shaky. He sounded drunk or exhausted. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know how far they'd go." Amara was stone cold. "You stood up and screamed that you were married to me." Mark sighed. "They told me you were dangerous. That you stole money from Daniel's business. Helen said I'd be protecting him." There was a pause. Then he added, "I still have the original messages. I didn't delete anything." He sounded afraid. "Cynthia is threatening to sue me. She said she'd ruin my life if I talk." Mark agreed to email the messages. Every text, every voice note, every file. He kept his word. The next morning, Amara had a digital folder full of damning evidence. Lillian and Margaret coaching him, feeding lies, even rehearsing the timing. With that, Amara built a second file, more detailed, more explosive. She hired a lawyer. Not just for defamation or emotional distress, but for criminal conspiracy, harassment, identity theft, and fraudulent interference with a wedding ceremony. And the best part, Mark was willing to testify. He signed a sworn statement. Amara finally felt like the tide was turning. But she also knew Margaret and Cynthia weren't finished. Days passed. No word from Daniel. Then a simple message popped up. "Can we meet one last time?" Amara agreed. They met at a quiet lakefront cafe. Daniel looked worn out. Eyes sunken, shoulders slumped. "I read everything you sent me," he said. "I believe you now. I confronted them. Mom says she did it to protect me. Cynthia still won't admit anything." Amara stared at him. "And what do you plan to do about it?" He didn't answer right away. "They're still my family." Amara nodded slowly. "Then this is done." She stood up and walked away. He didn't follow. That week something strange happened. Amara received an email from a recruiter. It was about a high-level marketing position at a luxury brand in Miami. Great salary, relocation bonus, fast track to promotion. But she never applied for it. The recruiter said her profile had been referred by someone named L. Stevens. He paused. Lillian was Cynthia's middle name. Amara checked LinkedIn. There it was, from a now-deleted consulting profile. Cynthia Lillian Stevens. It was her. But why? Amara played along. She scheduled a fake Zoom interview. When the meeting started, her jaw nearly dropped. On the screen was Margaret, dressed in a navy blue suit, pretending to be the HR director for the luxury brand. "We're very interested in hiring you," she said with a smile. "But we'll need to verify a few things. Criminal record, financial history, legal issues." Amara stayed calm, asked polite questions, and recorded everything. When it ended, she contacted the real company. They had never heard of Amara or Margaret. Once again they were trying to dig up dirt or plant it. Impersonating corporate officials was a serious offense. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was criminal. Mark called again. This time he was nearly in tears. "They found out I sent you the emails," he said. "Margaret's calling non-stop. She threatened to ruin my sister's life if I don't retract." Then he dropped a bombshell. "Cynthia sent me copies of your ID before the wedding. She said she got them from Daniel's laptop. She told me to use your driver's license info to make the marriage document look real. Amara's blood ran cold. They hadn't just tried to humiliate her. They had used her real information, identity theft. They had stolen her name, her number, her legal status, and used it against her in the cruelest way possible. Amara couldn't breathe for a few seconds. Identity theft. That crossed a line even she hadn't expected them to cross. Her mind raced through every interaction, every moment she'd left her purse unattended, every time Cynthia used Daniel's laptop. Somewhere along the line, they had taken a photo of her driver's license and used it to forge a legal document. This wasn't just a family feud anymore. It was a full-blown criminal operation. She sat in the dark, phone in hand, staring at the last message from Mark. They said if I talk, they'll ruin me. But I'm tired of lying. He was scared, but he was finally ready to tell the truth. The next morning, an anonymous email landed in Amara's inbox. No subject. One attachment. PDF. Inside were screenshots, text messages between Margaret and Cynthia from a burner phone. In them, they openly discussed hiring Mark, writing the wedding script, and their hopes that the shock would break Amara mentally. One line made Amara's jaw tighten. I don't care if she ends up in the psych ward. Daniel deserves better. The email was untraceable, but Amara knew who sent it. Mark. He was trying to clean his conscience. And he wasn't the only one stepping forward. Just 2 days later, another woman messaged her on Instagram. A stranger but not really. Hi, the message read. This might be weird, but I think I dated your fiancé once. Daniel, right? I saw the wedding clip circulating. Just wanted to say. You're not alone. The woman introduced herself as Naomi. She had dated Daniel a few years back and her story was eerily familiar. Cynthia made up fake texts from me to another guy. Told the family I was cheating. Then she spread rumors I had anger issues. Amara stared at the screen, mouth dry. Erect everything, Naomi added. I wanted to tell you. What happened to you? It's not new. Naomi offered to make a statement. Amara thanked her, and realized something vital. This wasn't just a personal attack on her. Cynthia had been doing this for years. More messages came in. 2 other women who had dated Daniel and been pushed out by Cynthia's interference. One had been labeled unstable. Another was painted as a gold digger, because she once asked about finances. Amara gathered everything. Naomi's statement, the others, the confessions, the texts, the emails. She built a thick, detailed case file with her lawyer. It wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about setting a precedent. Cynthia and Margaret had weaponized lies, hacked into devices, impersonated professionals, and shattered reputations. But now, their secrets were turning into evidence. Just when Amara thought Daniel would finally take a stand, he texted her again. If you go through with this, my family will never speak to me again. Amara stared at the message for a long time. Then she replied, then you better choose fast. And she meant it. The games were over. Around that same time, she heard about a family fundraiser, a dinner event hosted by Daniel's extended relatives. It was supposed to support a cousin's nonprofit, but she knew the real crowd would be there. The same ones who had whispered about her, judged her, stayed silent when she was humiliated. She wasn't planning to go, until Daniel texted again. Please come. I need to say something. I want everyone to hear the truth. Amara didn't trust him completely, but she needed closure. If he was finally going to say it, to call out his mother and sister in public, then she would listen. She arrived late, dressed in muted colors, hair pulled back, face calm. The room went silent when she walked in. Margaret saw her first, her jaw clenched, then softened into a forced smile. Cynthia whispered something to an aunt, who chuckled. Amara kept walking. She found a seat near the back. Daniel stood near the front, sweating, fidgeting. He walked up to the podium and tapped the mic. Before we begin tonight's fundraiser, Daniel said, voice low, I need to address something personal. Something ugly. The room tensed. Everyone leaned in slightly. He continued. At my wedding, a man interrupted and claimed Amara was already married. Many of you saw the video. Some of you believed it. I believed it. For a few seconds. But I was wrong. His voice cracked slightly. My family planned that. They hired the man. They forged documents. They paid him to destroy her reputation. And I stood there and let it happen. The air in the room shifted. Whispers spread like fire. Margaret stood up, her voice shrill. Daniel, that's enough. But he ignored her. I've seen the proof, he continued. Emails, payment records, fake job interviews. I've even seen the Facebook group. A few heads turned. Cynthia, you made that group. You lied about Amara and others before her. I've spoken to those women now. I know the pattern. Cynthia's face went red. This isn't the place for this, she barked. A cousin stood up and asked, Did you really fake a job interview? Cynthia stuttered, then fell silent. Margaret stepped up next, grabbing the mic. This woman, Margaret said, pointing directly at Amara, has poisoned this family. She manipulates people. She turned my son against us. Amara stood steady and firm. What have I done, Margaret? Other than love your son. Other than defend myself when you tried to destroy me. The room fell silent again. Daniel took the mic back. You didn't try to protect me, he told his mother. You tried to control me. And I let you. But I'm done. Cynthia stormed out. Margaret hesitated, then followed. The murmurs became full-on conversations. Is that legal? That's insane. They should be arrested. Amara just stood there, breathing for the first time in weeks. People began approaching her. Some apologized. Some hugged her. One elderly aunt whispered, You're stronger than all of them combined. Amara smiled politely, but her heart was still guarded. The battle wasn't over yet. Her legal team was preparing to file charges. Mark's testimony, the fake job interview, the stolen ID, the burner phone texts, the defamatory Facebook group. It was all airtight now. What began as a public ambush had become a case study in malicious manipulation. But Amara wasn't afraid anymore. She had walked through fire in front of an audience, and walked out without burning. After the fundraiser, Amara walked to her car alone. The night was cool, the air finally still. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. Daniel had finally spoken the truth, but too late. The damage had been done. She had endured lies, public humiliation, and a smear campaign while he stood frozen. One speech wouldn't erase the silence that had nearly broken her. Her mind wandered to the court dates ahead, the testimonies, the media inquiries her lawyer warned might come. But she was ready. Every wound had become part of her armor. Later that week, her lawyer confirmed everything was in motion. Criminal charges were being filed for defamation, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The impersonation of a corporate officer made the case even more serious. Mark had officially signed his witness statement. The previous girlfriends had agreed to testify to Cynthia's long-term harassment patterns. The evidence was undeniable now. They thought you'd break, her lawyer said. But you built a mountain of proof instead. Amara nodded, calm. She wasn't doing this for revenge anymore. She was doing it to make sure they never did this to anyone else again. A week later, Amara received an unexpected call from a reporter with a small news outlet in Illinois. We've heard about the wedding incident, the woman said. Anonymous tip. We're not looking to sensationalize it, but if you're pursuing legal charges, there's public interest involved. Amara didn't say yes. But she didn't say no either. Instead she asked, Will my voice be the one leading the story? The reporter said yes. Then let me think about it. She knew how stories like hers were twisted. But she also knew that staying silent had nearly cost her everything. Daniel tried to call her again that evening. She didn't answer. She wasn't angry anymore, just done. They had shared real moments once. But a man who couldn't raise his voice to defend her had no place in her future. Instead of calling back, she wrote him a short message. "Thank you for speaking up. But I'm moving forward without you. Please respect that." There was no reply. She assumed he got the message loud and clear. She hoped, for his own sake, he would finally draw boundaries with his family. But that was no longer her burden to carry. Amara began to rebuild. Slowly, quietly. She deleted the hateful messages, reported the Facebook group, blocked Cynthia and Margaret on every platform. Her lawyer filed a takedown notice to have all images from the wedding removed. Naomi, the ex-girlfriend, checked in often. They even got coffee once, laughing awkwardly about how their lives had crossed paths through chaos. "You're stronger than I ever was," Naomi admitted. Amara smiled. "I wasn't strong. I was cornered. That changes a person." She was learning to accept that healing didn't always look like joy. Sometimes it looked like boundaries, like silence, like starting over. One afternoon, Amara walked into her office and found a small box on her desk. No note, no return address. Inside was a keychain with a tiny silver sword engraved with her name. Quiet message. She didn't know who sent it, but she held it in her hand and felt something shift. She clipped it onto her house keys without overthinking. A week later, her boss called her in. "I nominated you for a leadership award," she said. "Not just for your work, but for how you handled everything with grace. We see you, Amara." For the first time in months, Amara felt her throat tighten, not from panic but from pride. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings moved forward. Mark's testimony revealed everything. The payment, the instructions, the stolen ID, even how he was coached to fake nervousness during the wedding to look more believable. The judge issued subpoenas for Cynthia's and Margaret's financial records. The Venmo payments, the burner phone records, the fake job interview. All of it aligned perfectly. Cynthia hired a lawyer. Margaret denied everything. But the evidence kept surfacing. Amara stayed out of the noise. She focused on work, therapy, and rest. Her peace was no longer tied to anyone's opinion, not even Daniel's. As court dates approached, the wedding video went viral again, but this time with context. A popular women's justice page shared a summary of the case titled, "She brought receipts when the bride was ready for the ambush." Comments poured in. "This is why I keep documents too. Her calm in the middle of chaos is next level." Amara stayed quiet. She didn't post. She didn't respond. But she saw it. And part of her, the part still healing, felt seen. She hadn't just survived a public takedown. She had dismantled it piece by piece. Cynthia pled no contest to several of the charges. Margaret tried to shift all the blame to her daughter, but the judge didn't buy it. "You funded the attack," he said, "and encouraged it with full knowledge." The case wasn't just about Amara anymore. It became a warning to others, about how far obsession and control can go when left unchecked. When the verdict came, Amara was at work. Her lawyer texted, "It's done. We won." She excused herself, went to the bathroom, and locked the door. She sat on the sink, breathing hard. Then she laughed. Not loud. Just enough to release the weight. She went home that evening, made a cup of tea, and opened her windows. The sky was pink, the air quiet. She didn't need confetti or a party. She had peace. Her phone buzzed. Naomi again. "Drinks soon." Amara typed back, "Definitely." She walked to her small bookshelf, pulled out the thick case file she'd built, and slid it into a box labeled "Closure." She sealed it shut and tucked it into the back of her closet. Not to hide it, but to remind herself. She had faced war in lace and heels, and walked away not broken but victorious. Not long after the court ruling, Amara received an invitation in the mail. No return address, just a plain envelope. Inside was a glossy invitation to a so-called healing circle, hosted by Margaret. The card read, "For those seeking forgiveness and family restoration." Amara stared at it, expression unreadable. The irony made her stomach churn. Forgiveness. From the woman who had tried to dismantle her life. She placed the card on her desk and didn't even consider attending. Healing was not a performance. And it certainly wasn't something orchestrated by the person who had caused the wound. That night, she lit a candle and took a bath. The silence was different now. Less hollow, more sacred. The bubbles shimmered around her skin as she leaned back and closed her eyes. For months, she had braced herself for impact, worn armor everywhere, waited for another blow. But now there was stillness. Not perfection. Not revenge. Just space. She had finally taken her name back, her dignity back. And now her peace was hers again. She whispered into the candlelight, "They don't get to tell my story anymore." And she meant every word. Days later, she received an unexpected message on LinkedIn. A woman named Grace, a regional director at a prominent women's rights organization, had read about the case and wanted to connect. "What you went through is horrifying," she wrote. "But how you responded is extraordinary. We'd love for you to speak at our upcoming seminar on digital abuse and modern smear tactics." Amara hesitated. She wasn't a speaker. She was just someone who got caught in someone else's war. But then again, maybe that was exactly why her voice mattered. She replied with a simple, "Let's talk." They met at a downtown cafe. Grace was warm, sharp, and direct. "People think abuse only looks like bruises," she said. "But lies, impersonation, online smear campaigns, that's violence too. And we rarely talk about it." Amara listened carefully. "You don't have to tell everything," Grace continued. "You just have to tell the truth that you're comfortable with." Amara sipped her coffee slowly. "I never thought I'd become an example," she said. "I just didn't want to be erased." Grace smiled. "And you weren't. You left a trail of truth." Amara agreed to speak. The event was held at a local university. The room was packed. Mostly women, a few men, lots of pens scribbling notes. When she stepped on stage, her heart pounded. But then she saw Naomi in the front row, giving her a nod of encouragement. "My name is Amara," she began. "And last year, I stood at the altar thinking I was about to marry the love of my life. Instead, I was ambushed by his family, accused of a fake marriage, and left to defend myself in public." The silence was respectful. Listening, she kept going. "I was called a liar, fraud, criminal. But I wasn't any of those things. I was just prepared." A few soft chuckles rippled through the room. "I documented everything. Followed my gut. And when the storm hit, I had receipts. Not because I thought I'd be attacked, but because I knew what it felt like to be doubted." Her voice didn't shake. "What they did wasn't just personal, it was criminal. And I took legal action not just for myself, but for the next woman they'd try this on." That was the moment she knew. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was a warning. And a beacon. After the seminar, people lined up to speak with her. Some cried. Some hugged her. One student said, "You made me feel brave." Another handed her a note that simply read, "Thank you for not shrinking." Amara kept all the messages in a small envelope tucked in her nightstand. They weren't trophies, they were reminders. That every voice mattered. That even the quietest woman in the room could stop a storm if she chose to speak. She wasn't chasing attention. She was just reclaiming her space. And it turned out, people had been waiting to hear her voice. Meanwhile, the fallout in Daniel's family deepened. Cynthia lost her job at the consulting firm after her charges were made public. Margaret's social circle shrank as more people learned what she had done. Daniel reportedly moved to another city. Amara didn't keep tabs, but updates trickled in through mutual acquaintances. "He asks about you," one friend said. "He says he wishes things could have been different." But Amara never responded. There were no more messages to send. Some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt. Some goodbyes weren't spoken aloud. They were lived. Months later, Amara stood in her kitchen making tea when her phone buzzed. It was an email, subject line. "Nomination confirmed." She clicked it open. Grace's organization had nominated her for a Voices of Resilience award. She read the message 3 times before it sank in. Then she smiled. Not because she needed recognition, but because, once again, the truth had spoken louder than the lies. She set the phone down, stirred her tea, and looked out the window. Her life had been scorched and rewoven. Not as it was, but as it was meant to be. That night she sat down at her desk and began to write. Not emails, not court statements, but her story. Her version. Her voice. She didn't know if it would become a book, a blog, or just something she kept for herself. But it flowed. The pages filled slowly, each sentence a reclamation. She wrote about fear, about silence, about surviving a wedding sabotage with dignity and fury. She ended the last paragraph with a line that felt truer than anything. They tried to bury me in shame, but I grew roots instead. As the months passed, Amara didn't rush to fill the space Daniel left behind. She focused on her work, her health, and rebuilding friendships that had been frayed during the chaos. She didn't date. She didn't explain. For once, her time belonged only to her. Every morning felt like a quiet victory. She went for long walks without looking over her shoulder. She opened her curtains without bracing for judgment. Her world was smaller, simpler, but sacred. She had carved out peace not by forgetting what happened, but by refusing to let it define her. One weekend, Naomi invited her to a women's retreat by the lake. "It's not therapy," she said, "but it kind of feels like it." Amara hesitated at first but agreed. There, among women she didn't know but instantly connected with, she found a sense of solidarity that softened something inside her. They shared stories, not all as explosive but all threaded with survival. She listened, she spoke, she laughed until her cheeks hurt. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was not just surviving. She was living. And not cautiously but freely. During one evening session around the fire, a young woman asked, "How did you know when it was time to stop fighting and just walk away?" Amara stared into the flames for a moment. Then she said, "When I realized I was the only one standing up for me. And I deserved better than that." The group nodded quietly. Someone whispered, "I needed to hear that." And Amara felt the full weight of how far she had come. She wasn't just healing in private anymore. She was giving others permission to do the same. One quiet morning after the retreat, Amara sat by the window with her journal open. The city buzzed faintly in the background, but her mind was still. She flipped to a blank page and wrote one word in the center: reclaimed. It wasn't just her story title. It was her reality. She had reclaimed her name, her narrative, her voice. Not because anyone gave her permission, but because she chose not to vanish. They had tried to reduce her to a lie. But she had turned that lie inside out, and shown the world the truth. The day she received the official settlement notice from the court, she didn't jump or cry. She simply read it, nodded, and placed it in the closure box with everything else. The damages awarded didn't change much financially. But legally and emotionally it meant everything. Cynthia and Margaret were now permanently restrained from contacting her. The smear campaign was shut down. The Facebook group was deleted. And with it, the last visible stain on her reputation was wiped clean. She walked to her mirror that night and whispered, "They don't get to touch me anymore." A year to the day after the wedding, Amara hosted a small dinner at her apartment. Just close friends, Naomi, her boss, Grace, and a few women from the retreat. No speeches, no toast, just laughter, warm food, and open windows. As the sun dipped below the skyline, Naomi leaned over and said, "You know, you're glowing differently these days." Amara chuckled. "It's peace. I didn't know it would look like this." They clinked glasses. "To new roots," someone said. "And to burning what needed to burn." Everyone nodded. It wasn't a celebration. It was a quiet honoring. Before the night ended, Grace pulled Amara aside. "You're going to be asked to tell this story again and again," she said. "Are you ready for that?" Amara didn't answer immediately. She looked around the room, saw the smiles, felt the safety. "I think I am," she said. "But only if I can tell it my way." Grace smiled. "That's the only way that matters." Amara knew it wasn't over. The echoes of that day might still follow her into new rooms, new relationships. But now she had armor made of memory, and grace she gave to herself. One last thing came unexpectedly. A letter from Daniel. Handwritten. No return address, just a soft fold in the envelope. Inside he wrote, "I won't ask you to come back. But I needed to say this. I'm sorry I let silence be my answer. I was afraid. And I should have been brave." Amara read it twice. Then placed it in a drawer. She didn't hate him. She didn't love him anymore either. What she felt was something else entirely. Gratitude for the honesty. Relief it had come too late. Peace that she didn't need to reply. As fall rolled in, Amara stood in front of the courthouse one last time. This time not for battle, but to sign final paperwork closing the civil suit. She wore a black coat, red lipstick, and the same heels she had worn on her wedding day. But they didn't feel cursed now. They felt claimed. The security guard held the door open and said, "You look like a woman who won." She smiled softly. "I am." And then she walked inside, back straight, hands steady, head high. This wasn't her ending. It was the door to her next beginning. In the end, they thought they were breaking a woman. What they didn't realize was that they were building one instead. Amara didn't rise out of ashes. She planted herself in them. And when she grew, it wasn't just taller, it was stronger. Her scars weren't erased. They were inked into her story like armor. She had been ambushed in a white dress, accused without cause, abandoned by the man who was supposed to stand beside her. But she never folded. She documented. She confronted. She spoke. And most importantly, she lived. Fully. Loudly. On her own terms.